Okay, now back to this report at Harvard, okay? Food stamp usage has surged 77% during the recession, which means since President Obama took office. And that's not like that, because it started right about the time he took office, okay, or just before. Social Security benefits are going to be slashed within the next 20 years. And we'll get to that exact number in a moment. Now, this report is considered one of the authoritative independent analyses. You always hear the president talk about, well, the independent economists tell us. Well, this is independent. It's from Harvard yet, his alma mater. And it's review of federal spending. Here is their summation from the authors of the report. You ready? I'm going to quote this. If the federal government spent its yearly revenues exclusively on debt reduction, in other words, every one of our checks that we send them on April 15th for those that owe money, and ceased all of its operations. So they took all of their money, didn't operate anything in government, shut down every phase of our federal government. It would take 4 years to pay down the debt. 4 years of no federal government at all. Or they could simply bring it down in one fell swoop if they just had us all write them a check. Every man, woman, and child in the United States, every person living in the U.S., could simply send them a check, and we could pay this off at one time. And that check for each one of you, each one of your children, each one of your grandchildren, the wealthy, those that aren't working, every person in America would have to send them a check for $52,000. Then they could pay it off in one fell swoop. Now, obviously, that's not realistic, right? Because you can't have little infants paying $52,000. Now we're just going to settle them with that bill and pay it later. And you can't have the unemployed pay $52,000 up front. In fact, they can't make you pay $52,000 up front, probably. So let's take a look. Let's take a look if they revise this so they only put this levy on the workforce, those that have jobs. Obviously, that would be fewer people. Then they would have to collect a check from every working person in the United States for $106,000, and they could pay off the federal debt. That's where our tax money's going. Meantime, you heard about that farm bill that our Senator Debbie Stabenow pitched, right? The farm bill, we're helping the farmers, right? That farm bill had $71.8 billion in food stamp money in it. The food stamp money has gone up 77%. Most of that farm bill was food stamp money. That's where our federal tax dollars are going right now. That's the kind of spending that's going on in Washington. But that's not all that's going there for the elite, for the ruling class, as Angelo Codevilla called it. Take a gander at some of the other issues that have affected us, if you would, for a moment. Just consider global warming and all it's already cost us, okay? All this global warming, as if we can somehow turn a switch and turn in the perfect climate, as if climate has never changed on this planet before. You see, to believe in this whole myth of man-made global warming, you've got to do one thing. You've got to become you've got to develop amnesia, and you've got to forget what's happened in the past. You have to forget when you get Hurricane Sandy on the East Coast that the hurricanes are what developed Long Island. That's how Long Island came to be, because hurricanes ripped through there and created it. But that was a long time ago. We have to forget that. Okay. We have to forget all of these things. When we had the typhoon out in the Philippines not all that long ago, we were told, well, this is just a calamity, and it was. There were 5,000 people killed, maybe more. Many left homeless, but it was a horrible storm. And it was blamed on global warming, of course. As global warming increases, we're going to see more and more of these storms, and they're worse and worse, just like this one. Well, except for the one that ripped through there a couple of decades ago that killed 500,000 people. That had nothing to do with global warming. Now we're told that in this latest UN report, they're warning us again, this time we're really scaring you. This time we're going to run out of food because of global warming. Of course, you've got to be an amnesiac again, because if you just look back to the 1970s, when these same people, like a scientist named Paul Ehrlich, were warning us about global cooling and telling us the food supply would be gone by the year 2000. It was going to be gone because of global cooling by 2000. How'd that work out? All these warnings are based on computer samples that are projections. They're projections, and they've always been wrong. Here's the problem, though. It's not just that they make an emphasis on global warming. That's one thing. That can be argued against. The problem is that it's driving policy in this country, and it's driving the use of our tax dollars, and it's driving control. You don't believe that? How many of you heard Cliven Bundy this last week? Huh? Cliven Bundy, who's got a ranch out there in Nevada. And his trouble started back in the mid-90s when they decided, they, being the ruling class, those that make their living and get their power through government, they decided that we needed to do something in that area of Nevada to protect an endangered species called the desert tortoise. So what we had to do, because we needed that desert tortoise to have its environment protected, is we had to take the land that was ranched by Cliven Bundy and his family since the 1800s, and we had to declare it federal land, which we did. And now if Mr. Bundy wanted his cattle to graze on that desert land out there, he had to pay a fee to the Bureau of Land Management, the federal government, to protect the habitat of the desert turtle, so that the Bureau of Land Management could somehow go in there. I don't know what they're replanting out there, because not a whole lot grows in the desert, but that's what they use the funds for. Well, that's coming. Please, let me finish. Unless you'd rather trade places with me and you give the rest of this. I worked hard on this speech. So, at any rate, Bundy said, I'm not doing that. You got no right as the federal government to take this property away. This is a states' rights issue. And you can't take this away. And if I'm going to pay anybody this fine, you tell me I got to pay to have my cattle graze on this property, I'm going to pay it to my county here in Nevada. And they're not charging me. So I'm not paying you. So now you have the federal government telling him, sorry, Mr. Bundy, and they've gone to court against him twice, federal court, of course, and they've won. He's been ordered to pay this money. And his bill has been run up, the government says, to over $1 million. They want $1 million because his cattle, and the cattle, think about this, have been grazing that land. Hell, the buffalo, who have been extinct for years and years and years, there used to be 60 million of them, probably roam that same land where the desert turtle has set up a housing development. But the buffalo are gone, the desert turtle's still there, and we're taking land away from a rancher whose cows are eating brush so that we can protect the desert turtle, we're told. And the environmentalists are going, oh, right on, we got to protect the environment out there. We're doing the right thing. We've got to make this man stop. And so we've sent in armed guards now. Well, come to find out, there's even more at work here than the desert turtle, as this gentleman so wisely pointed out a moment ago when he was about to finish this address to you. God bless you, sir. I love you. You know why I love you? Because you're on top of it. You follow it. That's why I'm serious. I love you. I'll kid you like crazy, and I won't give you my lines about people who heckle speakers, okay? Oh, there are a bunch of them. You know, I've shared these with people before. You get people who heckle you in an audience like this. Tony Katz, feel free to use this whenever you want, okay? Usually when something like that happens, you know what I say to them? I say, ladies and gentlemen, a great example of why some species eat their young. But I don't do that in friendly crowds like this, because I love this man. He follows the news. He's an advocate like you and me of limited government. You like your government small, so do I. We differ on cigars, that's all. At any rate, so Cliven Bundy's in this fight with the Bureau of Land Management. They're out there with their armed guards. They got tasers. They're threatening people. And you know what else they set up out there? Now keep in mind, their premise for all of this is the whole global warming thing, the environmental thing about the desert tortoise, right? That's what they keep telling us this is all about, that desert tortoise, keeping that property, okay? Well, there's some support for Mr. Bundy, from his family, from his friends, from other ranchers out there, and now from militia members who are coming from other states to join him on the property and defend him. And he's concerned. I had him on the show this week. He's concerned that there's a possibility that we could see another Ruby Ridge out there, or a Waco. I mean, that's a very real possibility whenever you have armed government soldiers, you call them thugs if you like, that may fit. I mean, they're tasing people. A woman's pregnant, got attacked by one of their dogs. Another lady who's a cancer survivor got tased, got thrown to the ground. People are getting knocked around out there. But anyway, so Bundy has got his supporters out there. Well, the government doesn't want those people interfering with the effort to round up his cattle. They're seizing his cattle. He's got 900 head of cattle worth about $1,000 a piece. You know, that's almost a stack of $1,000 bills 4 inches high sitting there, okay? And they're rounding up his cattle and taking them. I don't know if they're making steaks, killing them, putting them in a pen somewhere, I don't know, but they're taking his cattle. Well, the people who are protesting this are being told you can protest, but you can only do it in certain areas. So they've set up these pens for them out there. Did you hear about this? They're called First Amendment zones. And the government, your U.S. government, where you're sending your tax checks this week, your federal government is deciding where you're going to get the right to exercise your First Amendment guarantee of free speech. That's what it's come to out there. This is a totalitarian operation by all measures. And it turns out now, we're just finding out, through the work of some very, very bright reporters out there, we're finding out that this may not be about the desert tortoise after all. Because it turns out, anybody ever heard of Harvey Whittemore? You ever heard of him, Harvey Whittemore? This gentleman, I knew you had. I knew it. You know what else I know about you? I know your parents, when you were a baby, didn't drop you on your head. That's because you. I know you. Now you didn't fall off any turn-up truck, you know, and you might have been born during the day, but you weren't born yesterday, sir. I can tell. Well, we're finding out that Harvey Whittemore is involved with a business that has an interest out there. Harvey Whittemore, by the way, was convicted in court last year on 3 felony counts of funneling $150,000 in illegal campaign contributions to a politician named Harry Reid. That's who Harvey Whittemore is. Well, Harvey Whittemore is involved with this company that has Chinese investors. That yes, here we go. You got it. Now you're starting to catch on. You're catching on to this whole thing, and it all goes back to the global warming thing, okay? It all goes back to that bigger government, these elitists, this ruling class that knows better than you do, that's got their hands on your pocketbook right now. It all goes back to them. It ties right in with what Colbeck said, and that's why I tell you, read that book, The Ruling Class, okay? Because these investors and the Chinese want to do something on that property out there, and guess what it is? They want to build a solar ranch. A ranch full of solar panels to develop green energy. That's what they want to do with that property. Wonder what that's going to do for the desert tortoise. What do you suppose? Desert tortoise going to survive all that heat out there? It's going to make the desert seem cool by comparison. But that's what's going on out there with this man, Bundy. You see this totalitarianism in so many ways right now, though. And that's the only explanation. It's the only word that describes what we're witnessing out there. And there's no debating it. As you see, they're setting up a zone for free speech. You're guaranteed free speech? Not out there. You get what Mr. Bundy told me is a pig pen. You get herded off into this pen, and that's where you can speak, and that's it. You can't speak anyplace else. They banned flights from under 3,000 feet in that whole area where the ranch is while they carry out this operation. Well, you know what flies under 3,000 feet, don't you? Helicopters, news helicopters. You see, evidence. So you can't fly there anymore either. So if the news stations want to cover what's going on out there, in case CNN never wants to get away from that Malaysian plane coverage and see something that's going on in our country, they're not going to be able to with their helicopters. So you're limiting free speech out there, but consider what else we've witnessed here, okay? What else have we witnessed just recently? Not Mr. Bundy and his supporters near free speech. What about Condoleezza Rice? One of the great government servants that we've had for our money. She's been the Secretary of State, and she's been one of the top advisors to a 2-term U.S. president. And yet, when she gets invited to speak at a liberal school, there's a movement against her to ban her from speaking because she lied about the Iraq War. Probably told the truth about you can lose your doctor, you can lose your insurance, but she lied about the Iraq War, they claim, and so she should not have a right to speak. I think she's got it bad. What about Brandon Ike, the CEO at Mozilla? Forced out of his job because 6 years ago he gave $1,000 to the campaign to promote a ballot initiative in California that would make marriage be described as between a man and a woman. In other words, it would not allow same-sex marriage in California. And the liberals, the totalitarians within that organization and outside, forced him out of his job. He was forced to resign. Brandon Ike, when he gave that money, that $1,000 to that cause, he did it in 2008. The same year Barack Obama was on the campaign trail espousing marriage as being between a man and a woman. Before he, quote, evolved on the issue in the last couple of years because it became more popular to generate campaign support from the gay community. Just last year, Hillary Clinton changed her mind too. She also believed marriage was between a man and a woman, just as Mr. Ike did. Nobody has called on them to be removed from, well, she's not in office right now, she wants to be, and Barack Obama still is, and nobody held him to the same standard. But then, he's not on the other side, is he? He's not in that ruling class. He is in the ruling class. He's not in our class. It's called the country class. But that's what's happening in our country right now. And this is where I get back to what I told you earlier about how I really limited my speeches. I always said, you know, I don't want to speak. I just don't feel like I have enough to say to people. And what am I going to say to people? And really, am I going to have an impact? And I started thinking about it more and more, as I told you before. And I said, you know, everybody has an impact. Everybody does. You look back at the words, it's often, this is a quote that's often been attributed to a lot of different people, but the man who originally spoke these words was a reverend in England, a pastor named Charles Aiken, when he said, all that's needed for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. There's another man in England who picked up on that by the name of Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke was a British politician, a member of Parliament. He was a statesman and a supporter of the American Revolution, strangely enough. And Edmund Burke said, when bad men combine, the good must associate, else they will fall, one by one, an unpitied sacrifice in a contemptible struggle. And that's what really has hit home to me. That one by one, we're going to be like Winston Smith in Orwell's 1984 and picked off, just like Mr. Bundy is right now. Just as we're witnessing our government do things that we could never have imagined would happen in our country. That they would use our money in ways that we could not have imagined would ever be used to promote themselves through subsidies to cronies, for solar farms and the habitat of desert tortoises. And it's the realization of that if we don't each do whatever we can, whether it's speaking up or getting directly involved in the political scene, that we're going to continue to see this ruling class move into place. They don't have a D next to their name, they don't have an R. All they have is a P, power. Power, and that affiliation with power that makes them the elite and the ruling class. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to stand up in front of groups like this one, full of dedicated Americans in our community, who are so passionate about the principles of freedom guaranteed by our founding fathers, and I'm going to stand there and tell these people, get involved, it's the only way you can fight this. And you've got to fight back because you're watching this country's very basis unravel in front of your eyes, as unbelievable as that might have seemed to you just a decade or so ago. You're watching it unravel right now. And if I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to encourage you to get involved, then I sure as hell better be willing to do the same myself by doing something simple like going and talking to somebody once in a while. So I thank you for being here today. I urge you two things in closing. I urge you, one, read Angelo Codavilla's book, okay? I get nothing out of that, so don't think I'm making a profit. It's called The Ruling Class. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it probably in a bookstore. Go read it. And then two, get involved. You're showing your willingness to do that by being here today. Randy gave me a pin earlier when I got here. It's really cool. It's a Prosperity for Americans pin. And I'm going to put it on right now and I'm going to wear it. And I'm going to wear it every time I speak, and I encourage more people to get involved. And Tony Katz is going to be up here to wow you in just a minute. I just met this guy, I love him already. Anybody who sets up the Freedom Cigar Club, God bless you, man. Randy, I got a question. Where's Randy?
Yes, sir.
Did you give Tony one of these too?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So Tony got the same thing. It's our gift for being here today. It's a cigar cutter. And it says on there, if I can read this without my glasses,
It's AFP
it says
Michigan.
AFP of Michigan, freedom fighter, Frank Beckmann. You bet. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for fighting for freedom and for prosperity for all Americans. God bless you all. Love you.